My favorite equestrian Australian client, Steph. Welcome to the Superhero Podcast. Woo!
Thanks, Jono. Thanks for having me. Thanks for accepting my offer if I want to do a podcast.
Yeah. Like, please, would you give me just a kind word that I can put on the website about our coaching together, and then you say, no, I want to go live and talk about it to everyone. It's super cool.
Yeah, I can't deny the people an insight into our coaching sessions. They're heaps of fun. I have heaps of fun.
That's
sometimes.
Great. That's great. Yeah. So look, we'll get into the coaching just now, but just to give an idea to everyone watching, like what was it like before you went on the health transformation? And I know there were steps as well. So it was like the darkness, and then there was the, you learned about new diet things, and then you went into the mindset. So maybe just give us a rerun, background.
Yeah. So, it depends how far back you want to go. If I go back to kind of a brief start, as a kid, I kind of didn't really have any health or weight problems or anything like that. And then as a teenager, in those, I guess, kind of pivotal years for a girl, I sort of noticed that I was sort of a bit heavier than the rest of the girls in my grade. But I was sort of the same shape as my mum and my sister. So it wasn't so much of I just assumed I was different to everybody else and tootled on through life for a while there. And it wasn't until I had a massive stack off a horse and broke my left wrist, and I put on about nearly 20 kilos in weight in a very short period of time. And I then, of course, made the decision that I needed to get fit and healthy to be able to get back on a horse. And that's when I guess the latest few phases kind of really started. So I started out eating, the standard diet and what I thought was really healthy. And I then would go through a period and I just couldn't lose the weight. And I was just, go through a period of being absolutely then so devastated that I couldn't lose the weight that I was then basically eating a whole heap of junk food. And then it would just kind of cycle like that for a little while. And eventually I got onto one of those 12-week programs online. And that was a real eye-opener. It was like severe calorie restriction, huge amounts of exercise. And I think at the end of 12 weeks, I lost about 4 kilos. And of course, when you get in the support group, everybody's in there like, oh, I've lost 20 kilos, I've lost 10 kilos, I've lost 12 kilos. And I just thought, what is wrong with me? And at this stage, there was a few hints that it wasn't just about the food, that something else was going on. But I couldn't get out of bed and a few other things, and I didn't think twice about that. And it wasn't until I got onto a decent doctor that I ended up getting put on low carb, and she put me onto real meal.
A doctor, that's great.
Yeah.
And so, what changed for you when you got into low carb?
It took a little while, but the thing that I noticed is suddenly I could get out of bed. So I was at the worst kind of part in that I was going to bed at 7 p.m. and then I was sleeping through and barely getting out of bed at 7 a.m. And then by lunchtime, 1 p.m., I was almost asleep at my desk. So a couple of months into real meal and low carb, and all of a sudden I was almost back to being me. So I used to get really early. I'd be riding horses. I'd be going out and going to work. Work usually for us can start pretty early. And I just lost this whole big struggle with, trying to stay awake through my work day. It was amazing.
And then, so the diet worked, but then there were ups and downs, even just sticking to low carb as well.
Yeah. So I live in, I guess, a smaller town in kind of rural, regional New South Wales. And so it was quite common for us, as everyone does, we go down the pub once a week for a social dinner out, and the smallest comment from someone of, oh, you're ordering a salad, you're going to be healthy, or even, oh, what do like everyone else is ordering a beer and then suddenly I'm ordering a beer, and I'd go through cycles. And it was the same. I mean, we travel a lot for work. I'm away with work at the moment, and every trip away, you'd be good for 2 or 3 days and you'd be like, yeah, I'm nailing this. And then towards the end of the week, you'd get tired and bad food's just kind of everywhere. And you'd be like, oh, stuff that I've earned some chips, or, like one beer won't hurt. And so it just became this kind of cycle where I was going through, 2 or 3 weeks of eating really well, and then I'd blow it. And it started out that the blowout would just be like one meal, but I couldn't pick myself back up. And then it'd be a month of good and then a month of blowout.
Yeah.
Not a great cycle.
Yeah. And so, even when you found the diet that really worked for you, there was this sort of impact on the self-esteem from that cycle. Like how did you feel about that sort of upping and downing or yo-yoing?
It was probably worse doing that than it was when I didn't know what a good diet for me was. Like, that's the reality. Because when you know the path that you should be walking, but you're not actually walking that path, there's huge amounts of guilt and shame. And like, I'm a highly qualified person. I'm scientific minded. I know what I should be doing. I've done 7 years of uni, but I can tick every box on a piece of paper, but I can't not put bad food in my mouth. How is that how is that even a thing? So it just absolutely it just annihilated a lot of my self-confidence and things too, because it's such, everybody puts it out there like it's this huge thing of self-control. Like, you just got to have self-control. You just got to not do it. Like, come on, you can do it. Like, you make better choices. And then every time I'd fall up, it was like a personal thing. Like, I'm a bad person. I just can't do this. And I think that was where I really suffered then, to kind of get, it wasn't just a meal in my head. It was like, you're terrible, you're worthless, you can't do this.
Yeah. And so what did you think the problem was? Did you just think you were, I know that you've said it on a few occasions, like, oh, I must be shit.
Well, I wasn't going to swear on here, so, but it's yours. So if you want to swear and say I'm shit. Yeah, look, I didn't think that I was worthy of success. I think that's what it comes down to. Like, I just thought, like, obviously this is the universe's way of telling me, Steph Fowler, you just should be fat and unhealthy and just go sit in the corner. And that stings, eh?
Yeah, that's a massive burn, and I think that a lot of people listening will share that sentiment, because everyone says, low carb is the, discover this thing and your life will change. And like you said, even, you watch these forums and people lose like 30 kilos. So when you have discovered like some kind of breakthrough, and then for some reason you still can't stick to it, it's easy to think that, you're broken in a way. So I get it. And then what happened? So was that, and at that point, did you decide to join me, or was there a long period of that first?
So I probably had 4 years of that first. I'm a bit of a slow learner. No, not so much a slow learner. It was, I guess, in the background, there was always another excuse. There was always something else to blame, like it's work, or it's this, or, I just need to find a better job, that I'm not traveling so much, or I need to, whatever the case may be. And then I think after 4 years of that, the changing point was, I just felt like I was living the same year of my life over and over and over. And it gets to that point, it gets to the point around October, and you start reflecting back of like, what have I achieved in this year? Like, what have I actually done? And I think I was a member on Real Meal, like way back in the day when it was like just the online platform. And then the coaching thing came out, and I was kind of umming and ahhing about it. And I got to a point, and I just realized that I actually, like, the scales hadn't budged. I was nowhere, like, I'd lost weight, but I was nowhere near where I needed to be to keep the weight down with my chronic pain. And I was really heavily dependent on metformin, and it was just like, it was making me really crook. I had a lot of gut issues. And I just was feeling like, even though I was low carb, it was a huge effort. Like, food became this almost obsession with me. It wasn't easeful. There was not, I didn't flow from meal to meal, and it was just, life was all sunshine, roses and lollipops. It was just so much effort. And I just thought, like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be another way to this. So yeah, that's when I kind of joined the Real Meal coaching in October. And then since then, so I'm a horse rider, and I have a really little pony, and height-wise, I'm not too big for her, but I sort of swore, I made a promise to her. I was like, you know what, Friday, like, by the time you're ready to be broken in and I'm doing it all myself, like, I'm going to be right to sit on you, I'm going to be right to ride you, because there's weight limits and stuff now, with animal welfare. And like, I sit on her and I feel huge, because she's a little pony. And it just kind of came to this thing that I made this promise, and it's funny. It is so funny to me because, I've made the promise to myself over and over and over and over, and I've never been able to keep it. But I make it to a 13-hand pony, and I'm just like, dang, I didn't do that. And then I really felt it. And then I had someone else say something that I felt when I sat on her, and she kind of went like, oh, that's uncomfortable. And that's like the last thing that you then want. So then this, mentor that I really value in my life then was like, oh, you're a bit big for her. And he didn't mean it in a bad way, but it broke me. It broke me. And then I was like, nah, I need to do something more than this. There's got to be something different. There's something out there. And then, that's when I got onto you, and here we are.
And so, so food transformation, I think, is a broad term. And for many people, I think they think it's like go on a diet and change your body. What were you expecting, like before you joined, when you spoke about food transformation?
I don't actually know what I was expecting, because I was just in this sheer place of sheer desperation. And I remember, I think our first coaching session, I think I talked at you solidly with nervous energy for about an hour. Like, I don't think I almost didn't let you get 2 words in. I was just like, so I don't think I had any expectations, because in my mind I'd hit the bottom. There was, if I couldn't do this now, I might as well just sell all the things that and just find myself some old clumper of a quarter horse that is so not competitive. And that's just not who I am. Like, that's just not who I am as a rider or a person. So that was that was probably one of my biggest motivators.
Got it. And so what was the, in the first months, what were some of the significant, if you can remember that far back, what were some of the things that you did actually get, that you weren't expecting, or that really made a difference?
I think the first thing, like you say food transformation, and when you sort of said to me like, oh, we might talk about the food, maybe, if we get to it. And I was like, come again? How are you going to solve my eating problems without talking about the food? Like, is that even a thing? Like, are you qualified to do this, Jono? So it became pretty painstakingly obvious that all of the issues that I were having around food, it was nothing about the food, and it still isn't, which is so it was all the other stuff. It was all the stuff from my childhood and growing up with the family that I have. No judgment to them, but none of us come out of childhood as perfectly adapted human beings. So there was a lot of stuff that I had to kind of pick through and weave through, and then how that had progressed onto my life, because obviously there's traits that I've developed that make me really good at my job, but they make me a really not capable person when it comes to some things too. So it's like that thing where our greatest strength is our greatest weakness as well.
So like some of the things that you developed as a teenager to like help you are actually like costing you now. Do you have any of those that you feel comfortable sharing? Like one insight?
I'm an open book. It's really the survival mechanisms and a lot of the coping type things. So our family at times was quite challenging. I grew up with an alcoholic mother because she was unable to cope with the things that, it was her survival mechanism. And in that situation, I learned to be a perfectionist. I learned to try and please other people and, do the things that I needed to do to make everybody else happy. And so things like that, like that perfectionist tendency was my boom or bust attitude. I couldn't just have one chip and go, don't do that, Steph. It was like I had to, now you're a complete failure and you can't do this low carb because you just had one chip, and now, you're so totally not worthy of anything. And then, you know, like as soon as somebody would make a comment on what I was eating, or, you know, I would think that somebody would make a comment on what I was eating. A lot of it didn't even have to come down to a situation. It was also my perception of how the situation was going to play out. So yeah, even going to the pub, I'd decide on the way, like, okay, I'm just going to have the steak and salad, and I'm going to have it with the smoked butter, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And then I get there, and then just like everybody else in front of me be ordering like a, you know, a schnitzel or a palmy or something, and I just cave and make it look so seamless, like I wasn't even thinking the whole way there, trying to psych myself up to order that damn steak, and I just couldn't do it. And I was like, yeah, so I really like, and they were just all coping mechanisms basically. I learned to cope with and survive the situations, and then suddenly I got myself into a place where I didn't need to survive anymore. I could actually step forward and start thriving. And I just was like, why am I holding myself back all the time?
So that's a significant change, you know, getting from, so just to clarify, what you're saying is when you were sort of at the restaurant, like knowing that you wanted to order the steak, you would see everyone else doing it, and you're like, I don't want to draw attention to myself. I don't want to have this debate. So you're like, well, I'm just going to have the schnitzel like nothing ever happened. And then something, and then so you say now you just, you know, put yourself first, but that's a huge bridge or moat to climb over. So what was the shift that enabled you to do that?
I really started unraveling, I guess, some of the trauma that came attached with those survival mechanisms, and in that uncoupling the belief with that action. So like you know, people will judge me if I just order a steak and salad. Then got, you know, well, let them judge me, sort of thing. Like it wasn't even a thing. But it took a fair bit, because I had to work out what the belief was like. And some of my most memorable moments are when you try to do some of those word associations, you know, what do you think about people? And I'd be like, people are shit. Because in my head, everybody was just judging me. Everybody was judging me. And, you know, my health is shit. And I don't know how many times I used the word shit in like that 5 minutes. But, you know, it became so painstakingly obvious that actually the things that the beliefs that I had, like, you know, because I'm like, oh, I really like people. Like, I'm a pretty sociable person. And then you're like, what's the first thing that comes in your head when you say people? And I'm like, oh, shit. Because I just had, you know, and I thought I was pretty self-aware. And so to uncouple that and to dig kind of deeper was really, I guess, mind-blowing. And then I went through a period after that where I was like, man, all my beliefs have been smashed. Who am I? Like,
I remember that. Yeah.
What do I do? And I still couldn't figure out. And I still wasn't really being compliant all the time then either, because I couldn't figure out, like, is this thing of health, is that actually me, or is that not? Like, am I somebody that values that, or is this just me, you know, trying to fit the ideal body, fit the ideal, you know, that image that we see in magazines and on social media? And yeah, so it took me a while to kind of tear everything apart and then build it all back together. So
and in building it back together, you know, how did you decide to, you know, to put it back together? I mean, not how did you decide that you were going to put it back together, but like what led you to put it back together the way that you did, and how like final is that, you know?
I can't say that putting it back together was kind of a conscious decision. I think what I actually ended up doing, because I know we did talk about it a bit for a while there, and I think the thing that I ended up doing is I just stopped. I stopped doing everything. And in that space, in that pause, it was kind of like the real me kind of came out. And there were a few opportunities that opened up in that kind of period. And I was like, I want to do that. So like our spring challenge at our local gym started about 7 weeks ago. Not about, I'm very exact about that. I have the date permanently ingrained in my head. And so that kind of opened up at the time, and it was unfinished business. I'd started it a couple of years ago, and my foot broke down and I couldn't get through. I had massive bout of chronic pain, and it popped up at just this time that I was like, who am I? And I was like, oh, I haven't finished that. I need to finish that challenge. I need to, and then and then the flow on effect from that was like, well, if I'm going to hammer myself, then I need to do it and make it worthwhile. And so then I just kind of picked up my eating, and stopped, finally really cut back on alcohol and a few other things. And then I was like, actually got into the challenge. The first week was horrendous. I was like a little T-Rex. And then I got a couple of weeks into the challenge, and then I remembered how good it is to feel like I do. Like, I was probably this fit when I was working on stations up north in Northern Territory, in Queensland, because it's just a full-on physical job for 8-10 hours a day.
Wow.
So by the end of that, I was pretty fit, and I forgot how good it is to feel that fit. And then I was like, oh, this is like the old me. This is like the pre-injured foot me. Like, off we go. Let's do this. And I started really enjoying it. And then I was like, hey, I'd always pegged myself as not being an athletic person, not into sports, not, and then suddenly I was that person at 6 o'clock in the morning that's like with the rest of the team going, come on, guys, let's get to it. Like, let's do this thing. And then people go, oh, you're looking really good. Oh, yeah, that's the low carb. Like, you should try it. Like, and really pumped about this stuff. And I was like, what happened to me? And then I'm like, no, actually, this is the real me that's kind of been subdued down as people have been over the years, like, do this, do that, don't do this. But the chronic pain in that was probably the biggest thing. Like, it just totally messed with me, and I never realized how much it messed with me until I kind of came through the other side. So it's been really great to actually be like, well, hang on. And all I had to do was stop.
Yeah. Do less.
Yeah. It's insane.
So one of the other things I remember was, and I think you share this with many people, it's like how hard you were on yourself, getting back up. How's that changed?
Well, now I don't really feel like I have anything to get back up from. That's
so let me paint the picture. Like, when you used to like slip and fall, metaphorically, of course, like fall off the bus or whatever. Like, what were the kind of things you'd say to yourself when you like cheated on you? And I don't like the word cheat, but like broke the diet or whatever.
Non-compliant. Look, I'll put it this way: when my behaviors didn't align with my goals, I was probably the hardest. Like, you would not want me in your life when I'm like I was so like, it was like I don't know if I can, the Mean Girls, and like, how they're all like, and I was like that to myself. So I just tear myself down any chance. And it was so seamless, I didn't even realize I was doing it to myself. So it'd just be like, your worthless doesn't even cover some of it. Like, it was just horrendous. And then I'd beat myself up so much that I would just be like, well, there's no point even trying from here. Like, I'm just, what's the point? What's the point? So, yeah.
Yeah. And how did what changed that? And then how did it change?
I think that I finally accepted that I wasn't perfect. It sounds really crazy. But as a kid, I'd had this thing drilled into my head that you're perfect or you're worthless. So I brought home a test. It had 93%. I was so excited. I topped my year. It was amazing. I said to Mum, look at this. Look, yay. And she went, what happened to the other 7%? And so I sort of learnt as a kid that perfection was where, if you weren't perfect, you didn't have to try. And then suddenly I gave myself permission to not be perfect. And I literally wrote down on a piece of paper, and I learned this off a good friend of mine, Jane Pike. And she, we give ourselves permission slips at this clinic. I have permission to be afraid with whatever it is. And I literally wrote myself a permission slip that said, I have permission to not be perfect. And then what happened was we went out to dinner, and I stole a chip off my husband's plate, like I always do, because the impy does good chips. And I put it in my mouth, and I had one chip, and I went, oh no, I shouldn't have done it. And I went, wait, I have permission to not be perfect. That wasn't perfect. And then back to eating my steak. And I didn't touch any more chips. And then suddenly I went like, well, hang on. What just happened here? I didn't eat a whole thing of chips. And then next time we went out, and I said, I give myself permission to not be perfect. but I knew I didn't have to eat the chip because there was going to be other chips. And so I just sat there and ate my steak. And then suddenly that became the new normal, and that became the new thing. And, you know, and then when I went into this fitness challenge, things really kind of changed again, because I then, like, I knew it was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be really sucky. And there's a few, you know, things that go around the internet, and one of them's I think, it's not even on the internet. I think it's in one of those books. Oh, I can't remember who it is. 12 Rules to Life, I think. And it talks about the lobster. And the idea is, so a lobster has to lose its shell to grow completely. But when it loses its shell, it's really so it gets really tight and cramped and uncomfortable. And then it gets really vulnerable. And then it grows a new shell that's a bigger size. So to continue growing, lobsters have to basically put themselves first in discomfort, and then they have to make themselves really vulnerable, and then they grow. And so I've just had this thing for a while that's like, embrace the suck, but it's also like, embrace the lobster.
Embrace the suck.
Yeah, so I knew that this thing was going to be really sucky. So I sort of said, like, well, if it's going to be hard, I don't want to waste all that hard. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to do it properly. So I actually made my husband bet me. I'm so competitive. I actually made him like bet me. We were driving home from Sydney, and he took a bit of cajoling into it, because he's like, no, you don't quit. Like, you're not a quitter. Like, I've never seen you quit on horses, and you got a PhD. You never quit uni when it got hard. Like, you can. I'm like, no, I really need like that extra motivation. So I literally cajoled him into basically betting me that, you know, like, oh, Steph can't go a month without eating crap, and, you know, Steph can't go a month without eating, you know, drinking more than one day a week, or, you know. And I said, righto, like, what are we going to do? Like,
what's the wager here? Yeah.
What's the wager here? And he's not he's a cook, but he's a bit of a steak and potatoes man. That's the joke, is when we got together, all he would cook is like steak and fried potatoes. And so I was like, right, this is it. You're going to cook me a 3-course meal if I do this. And he was very reluctant. And eventually he finally was like, well, I guess so, because you're not going to give up. Like, this is like an hour further down the road. So yeah, and then I made him shake on it, and I was like, it's official now, we're doing this thing. So I worked out too, like, I'm very extrinsically motivated. You know, if I feel like I'm, you know, going to let somebody down, or like competitions, like I'm a competitive rider. The fitness challenge is really working for me because it's a competition. I'm like, you know, there's 2 girls in our group that are like super fit, and I'm like trying to keep up with them, and, you know, like pushing myself, because I'm like, no, like, I've got to, like, I can do this. I can't let them beat me. So then I just found a way to make that work for me in other ways. And yeah, the biggest thing is some days it's really hard. I get up and it's dark and it's cold and I don't want to do it. And then I just kind of go, like, I literally have to say to myself, like, embrace the suck, the lobster. And then that's like, because I've got that story ingrained in my head, that's enough for me to kind of like get out of bed. And you know, I don't want to let the team down, and, you know, it's all accountability and stuff like that. So yeah, I can't even remember what your question was, but I really feel the need to get the lobster. I'll tell anybody the lobster story that will listen.
No, that's great. No, I was asking about how you've changed from being super tough on yourself when you fail to, like, you know, how you are now when you know, pick yourself up. And so that's an important distinction, because I think a lot of people think that if they're hard on themselves, they'll be better next time. And I think what you've demonstrated is that actually, if you can't, you know, it's easier for you to get back on it and carry on, because you're not dealing with all that stuff, you know.
I think the thing is too, is that everybody thinks that the things that are right for us should be easy. Like, you know, you've found the right exercise when you enjoy it. You found the right diet when it's easy to stick through to food, and, you know, you don't have to question whatever. And the biggest thing, like, so I kind of put out on Facebook, made it public, made it a bit accountable, that there's this thing that I'm doing. It's a spring challenge, you know, so that when I went out to the pub, there wasn't so many comments or questions or, you know, things like that. And the biggest thing that I noticed is a lot of people like, oh, don't be so hard on yourself. And it's kind of like I wasn't sitting in the corner bashing myself over the back of the head with a mallet because I was overweight. It was more like, you know, the road there's a quote like that, it might be the right path, but it's not necessarily the easy one. And we just have this idea that things should be easy all the time, and the things that we need to do should be easy. And I mean, man, I hated the spring challenge for the first few weeks, but if I hadn't gone through that discomfort of pushing myself that hard for that amount of time, I wouldn't have gotten to the point that I actually enjoy it. So, I'm probably just as hard on myself, but it's like using that superpower for good rather than for evil.
Got it. And so I know we've spoken a lot about the spring challenge, and people are probably going to want to do that. But I'm interested to see, because obviously you mentioned a lot, what is the coaching that we've done together? How has that influenced your approach to the spring challenge, or how are they connected?
So I think, I think they are connected. They are connected because you can't, I guess for me, I almost wasn't doing any exercise outside of riding. And mentally I couldn't push myself through. So I'll feel a twinge in my foot and I would have been like, oh God, I'm breaking. Like, this is it. I can't do this. I can't do this anymore, because I had just really shit self-belief. I had really shit self-talk. And so it's kind of like those unconscious things that you hold about yourself are then the platform that everything else bounces off of. So when I believed that I wasn't worthy of being healthy, and that B, I wasn't worthy enough to have, the life that I wanted to live and be the competitive rider that I want to be, it's really hard then to do the things that get you from where you are now to hitting that goal. So I wasn't in a position that I could be open to doing the hard exercise, because I wasn't able to sit in the discomfort for long enough to get through it. So the mindset, the mental side of the coaching, the changing those beliefs, the smashing that apart, has then kind of cleared the way to then let me go, well, to be a competitive rider, I need to be fit. I need to be able to ride, work and come home and ride 3 horses.
And so how Good. And how is what you've learned or how you've transformed, has it trickled out into any other areas of your life?
I don't think there's an area that it hasn't flowed out into. I mean, work. I work in a competitive environment. I've quite often got to apply for, basically I've got to apply to progress within my job. I've got to apply for grant money, for research money. All of those things require you to say to somebody else that you are worthy. And when you don't believe that you are worthy, or you don't believe that, you have the knowledge to do the thing that you're trying to, say, well, if you give me $1 million, I'll fix your problem, then who else? Like, if you don't believe that about yourself, who else believes that? And, I'd have a bad day with the horses before, and I'd think like, oh, stuff it, I'll just sell everything. Like, I'm not getting anywhere. Who am I to be wanting to go to Grand Prix? Who am I to wanting to, do the things that I want to do? Like, I'm just a nobody. I should just sell everything and go find myself an uncompetitive plotter, and we'll just plot around. And like, I'd sit on that, not just for like 5 minutes and be like, oh, well, we're through that. Like, that would be a week of my life going, oh. And so then every day I'd go home inside and I'd just be lamenting around the place. And, the husband would be like, what are you doing? Just get over it. So I was a bit of a grumble bum, I would say, when bad things happened. Negative Nancy. No, Debbie Downer. That's who it is. So yeah, Debbie Downer. So quite often, it would be kind of things like, something would happen at work, and I'd be like, suddenly Steph's, had a whole bottle of red wine, not noticed. So, I guess my relationships are heaps better. And I'm a lot more aware of situations that I may probably have to manage a bit better, or, things that are likely to kind of send me a little bit frustrated, and kind of go, well, is this actually a realistic reaction to what's going on in front of me? So yeah, it's had a huge flow-on effect.
Great. And what is I know that you got to run soon, so I'll try to wrap it up soon. But the purpose of food transformation coaching is obviously to change your relationship with food. Obviously, I feel like, it's like more than food, but just to get it back to food, how has your relationship with food changed? I think you did mention some of that about,
yeah, it used to be really like food used to consume a fair bit. Even when I went low carb, it was like, oh, where can we eat? What can I have? What can I do? Oh God, you're never going to make this work. And someone will comment and it was always a point of anxiety. And what I'm finding now, like, I mean, I'm even away for work at the moment and it just seems so easy because it's, I know too, I guess that I've given myself permission to not be perfect, and then somehow that makes it easier to actually do the things, which is counterintuitive. But yeah, it's a lot more, it doesn't take a great deal of mental exhaustion to figure out, what to do. Or if someone makes a comment, oh, can you eat anything here? It's kind of like, yeah, don't worry about me. Like, you just do you and I'll just do me. Like, it's fine. And I mean it. Like, it's not a fake thing. I mean it, which is, it's super easy.
Yeah, that's super cool. And then so the obvious question is, this you're in mid transformation, and that was one of the things that we were going to talk about. So it sounds as though like the mind work is very far advanced, but perhaps you're still physically on the journey. And I think many people, they want to see the before and after photos. They want to see like the, how much weight am I going to lose? And I always tell people like, dude, you can lose so much weight in 12 weeks, but if you put it back on again, it doesn't count for shit. So, what's your take on that? And maybe tell us about like where you're going to, where you are right now.
That's exactly why I didn't want to do a testimonial for you. Because you're all like, send us the before and after photos, and I looked at the questions and I was like, oh, I could say, I could answer these questions easy. And I go to like the before and after, and I was like, I look just about exactly the same as I did when I joined up. I'm like, that's not good for marketing, is it? Yeah. So I guess for me, it's not about the food. And that really sums it up. And I mean, it is still a bit of a mind thing for me because the scales aren't changing, but my body composition is changing quite a lot. But I don't know where in the journey I am anymore because I stopped weighing and I stopped measuring, because being a scientist, being all about the numbers, if I'm following the path and I'm doing the process, my body will catch up, but my mind is very much like, oh, you put on a kilo this week. And like, in theory, I know I can just have a really big dinner the night before and the scales will go up. And so it just kind of really messed with my mind. And in that process, I had a goal weight of 62 kilos. And then I'm kind of like, I'm still, 8 kilos off that. But all of a sudden my body comp is changing a lot. So I don't know how close I will actually get to that 62 kilos and actually be like in a good body composition with a good fat percentage. So my plan is actually to go get a DEXA scan at some point, and do it a little bit more, I guess, intuitively in terms of when I feel good. But I've realized in that too, like for me, exercise is a bit of a non-negotiable. So I hit 70 kilos. I'm down 20 basically since when I started. And in that process, like to get from here to where I want to be the healthiest that I can be. There's a bit of body composition work to go, but I don't quite know at this stage what my end process, and I don't even know that there ever will be an end point, because I'm pretty sure that once I get to where I think I want to be, like I did when I was like, I just want to lose weight, and then I lost weight and went, oh, there's this whole plethora of things out there that, I don't even know about. And so, it's a bit the same with the horses. It's always a journey, and they say, the journey is the destination. So I don't know that I'll ever pull up and stop and, like at some point,
Yeah.
Who knows?
So what you're saying really is that it's changed from being like, like if the paint on your wall is like peeling off, you're like, okay, we need to scratch the paint and paint the wall, and that'll fix the problem and go away. And I think like what you're saying is that in the past, like the diet, like getting thin was like painting the wall, like, well, let's get this done so I can carry on with my life. And what it sounds like is that you've adapted your mindset to be like, cool, well, health's a journey, and once there's this bit of health ticked, like, there'll be more, and then now it's just like become part of your life. So it's one of the things that you're concerned about, not concerned, but like interested in actually.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, getting fit to ride horses, like to seriously ride horses, is probably the biggest changing point in that, because I'd go to a class at the gym and there'd be trainers in there, like other trainers would come in and do classes with like the trainer, and I'm like with a different trainer, and I'm kind of, the first week I saw it, I was like what's she doing here? Like, she's super fit, she doesn't need to be in this class. Like, what's going on here? And then slowly over time I realized, like, yeah, they're in the same class as me, but they're pushing themselves just as hard as I am, but like their weights are a little bit more because their push is here and my push is here. And it doesn't mean that, neither of us aren't working any less hard than the other one. It's just like, it's a constantly moving, you get to this point and you're like, yes, I'm here, but you can either stay at that point or keep pushing. And I just know within myself, like, I'm the kind of person that I'll keep pushing. I'll keep going. And there's some things on my list that I want to do. Like, I want to go from 5 years ago, I couldn't even step up on a 5-inch or jump up on a 5-inch block. And now suddenly I'm doing, 20-inch box jumps. And then I'm kind of going like, hey, I could do one of those like adventure races, where you army crawl under things and climb up things. And I'm like, because I never dreamed, when I broke my foot, I never dreamed that I could do that stuff. Like I broke my foot and suddenly my whole life ended. I got told I was lucky to be walking, lucky to be riding. Physically, I'd always been a pretty active person, and they suddenly said like, oh, well, this is just it for you. This is your lot now. And so the goalpost since then has kind of moved, but I'm a bit excited to see how far I can just kind of push that biology and take it. So yeah, I don't think my journey will ever end.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Steph, I know you got a meeting in like 6 minutes or something, so I'll let you go. But yeah, it's a pleasure working with you, and I look forward to our next session. And yeah, thanks so much for sharing your story. And I know that you added a lot of value. A lot of people watching, a lot of people giving love, lots of comments saying, "Oh, Steph, you legend."
Thanks, guys.
Cool. We'll chat soon.
Thanks, Dano. Yeah. Okay. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.